The Mafia boss came home early to fire the nanny, and what he saw brought him to his knees. Wyatt and Cole dropped their toys and sprinted across the lawn faster than Garrett Ashford had ever seen them move. His heart stopped. His first instinct was to run, to intercept them before disaster struck, but his feet stayed frozen on the gravel. What he witnessed was not an accident, not a scream, not blood. It was a miracle. His twin sons, silent as ghosts, for 2 years since their mother died, threw themselves into the arms of the caretaker. Josie Brennan dropped to her knees in the dirt without hesitation, catching them like they were the most precious things in the world. And then Garrett heard it. Laughter. Pure, innocent, alive, a sound he thought death had stolen forever. His knuckles went white around his keys. He had driven 2 hours from Manhattan to destroy this woman. His fiancée Brianna had called that morning, sobbing, swearing that Josie neglected the boys, tormented them, made them cry until they lost their voices. Fire her today, Garrett. The children are terrified of her. But the children weren't terrified. They were clinging to her neck like she was their entire universe. Brianna said they hid from Josie. Yet here was Cole, giggling as he tugged at her old silver bracelet. Here was Wyatt, burying his face in her shoulder, peaceful, safe, happy. The disconnect hit Garrett like a bullet to the chest. If Brianna lied about this, what else had she lied about? He stepped back into the shadows behind the ivy-covered pillar. The most feared man on the East Coast became a spy in his own home. Because if Josie was the angel she appeared to be in that garden, then the real devil was sleeping in his bed, wearing his engagement ring. Subscribe now to discover why this innocent embrace will start a war and expose a betrayal that will shake this empire to its core. If this story gripped you, hit like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe now, because Josie's darkest secret is coming. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Garrett was still standing in the shadows, his breath held tight in his chest. He'd meant to step out, meant to call the boys' names, but a sound from the front entrance stopped him cold. The click of high heels against stone hit like a hammer, quick, relentless, and sharp with aggression. He knew that cadence. He'd heard it hundreds of times at charity galas, on polished dance floors and private clubs. But today it carried a different weight. This was the stride of a hunter. The front door flew open, and Brianna Hartwell appeared on the steps. Her cream cocktail dress clung to her body without a single wrinkle. Her honey-brown hair was swept into a flawless updo, not one strand out of place. Her lipstick was a vivid red, the color of fresh blood. From a distance, she could have passed for a portrait of elegance and privilege. Her face, though, was something else entirely. It was twisted with rage, her green eyes narrowed like a snake's, her lips pressed into a cruel straight line. Brianna didn't see the black Bentley tucked out of sight behind the rose hedge. She didn't see Garrett standing motionless in the shadow of a stone column. She saw only one thing, and it sent her into a fury. "Josie!" The scream ripped through the quiet afternoon like a blade. The children flinched, their laughter dying on the spot. Josie lifted her head. Her body went rigid, but her arms stayed locked around the 2 little boys. Brianna charged down the steps, her heels stabbing into the grass, her movement like a storm making landfall. She jabbed a finger straight at Josie's face. Her nails painted a harsh red like claws dipped in blood. "I told you to keep them inside. Look at them, filthy like little beggars. If Garrett sees this, he'll throw you out like the nobody you are." Garrett felt his blood boil. He looked at his sons, and what he saw cracked his heart wide open. Wyatt and Cole froze where they stood, their small shoulders curled inward as if they were trying to shrink themselves, trying to disappear. Their heads dropped, unwilling to look up. Wyatt, the one who was always braver, slipped behind Josie and hid against her skirt, as if it were the last safe place left in the world. Cole trembled. His tiny hand clamped around the silver bracelet on Josie's wrist so hard his knuckles turned pale. This was the language of fear. Not fear of Josie, fear of Brianna. But Josie didn't step back. The young woman held her spine straight, one hand resting on Wyatt's head, the other keeping Cole pressed close to her side. Even though she was shaking, even though her voice wavered, she spoke. "Miss Brianna, the doctor said the children need sunlight and fresh air. It helps with their... Don't talk back to me," Brianna roared, closing the distance until Garrett could see spit fly from the corner of her mouth. Then she lifted her hand, palm open, ready to strike. In that instant, Garrett saw everything. Not the anger of a woman under stress, not the exhaustion of someone about to become a stepmother. It was pure disgust, contempt down to the bone. Brianna looked at his sons as if they were insects, as if they were filth, as if they were obstacles that needed to be cleared off the road leading to the throne of Ashford Manor, and Garrett understood. Brianna didn't love him. She loved the name Ashford. She loved the power, the money, the status this marriage promised. She'd spent her whole life being told she would marry into a powerful family. The name Ashford was supposed to be her crown, her ticket into the highest tier of society. Not a life sentence with two loud children who cried, who needed tenderness, who needed love. Garrett stepped out of the darkness. The sound of his leather shoes striking stone landed in the silence, dry and final. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Each footfall rang like a death bell. Brianna spun around. Her face went from flushed red to wax white in less than a second. The hand she'd raised lowered slowly. Her red lips parted. "Gee, Garrett, I didn't know you were home early." Garrett didn't look at her. His gray eyes passed through Brianna as if she were air, as if she were a ghost, as if she wasn't worth a second of his time. His gaze fixed on Josie and the 2 children shaking in her arms. Josie. His voice was low, controlled, strangely calm. "Take the boys inside. Wash their hands. Feed them whatever they want." Josie hesitated, her honey-colored eyes widening with fear and confusion. She didn't know what to do, didn't know who the coming storm would fall on. Garrett continued, still not looking at Brianna even though she stood right beside him. "Prepare their bath. No one leaves this house tonight." He paused, just long enough to turn the air colder. "Except those who don't know how to behave." The ground seemed to drop away beneath Brianna's feet. She opened her mouth to speak, to explain, to blame someone else, but Garrett's eyes finally swept over her. Only once, cold as ice, deadly as a blade. Then he turned away and walked toward the front door, leaving Brianna standing alone on the lawn, her cream dress stained with dirt, her face white as a corpse. Josie hurried the boys toward the kitchen entrance without daring to look back. But just before she crossed the threshold, she heard Garrett's voice carry behind her, chilling and edged with threat. "Brianna, my office. Now." Garrett had seen everything, and his silence was more terrifying than any scream. Garrett's office sat at the end of the first-floor corridor, behind a heavy black oak door that seemed to swallow sound. This was the place where he'd made decisions that had left the entire northeast underworld trembling. Dark paneled walls, bookshelves rising to the ceiling, a walnut desk more than a century old, no windows, only a single desk lamp casting a pale amber glow, just enough to see the face across from him, just enough to read fear when it surfaced in someone's eyes. Garrett went in first and didn't look back. He heard Brianna's heels behind him, skittering now, far slower than before, far more unsteady. He walked straight around the desk, lowered himself into the black leather chair, set both hands on the desktop, and looked at her. Only looked. He didn't speak. Brianna stood in front of the desk with her hands laced together, working hard to wear the posture of someone wronged. She drew a deep breath and began her performance. Tears slipped down her cheeks, smudging the red of her lipstick just slightly, her voice trembling with wounded indignation. "Garrett, you don't understand. That girl is impossible. She undermines me at every turn. She turns the children against me. I'm only trying to help, trying to be a good stepmother. But she makes it so hard. She looks at me with those eyes, like I'm the enemy. I'm not the enemy, Garrett. I love you. I love this family. She stopped, lifted a hand to cover her face, her shoulders shaking as if she were sobbing. "I just wanted the children to be clean when you came home. I wanted everything to be perfect. Is that so wrong?" Garrett didn't move. His eyes stayed on her, but his face gave nothing away. He'd watched her act 100 times at parties, in front of friends, in front of business associates. But this was the first time he could see, with unmistakable clarity, that she was acting for herself most of all. Brianna went on, her voice growing more desperate by the sentence. "She provokes me, Garrett. She knows exactly what to say to make me lose my temper. And the children, they used to love me. But ever since she came, they run from me. They hide from me. She's poisoning them against me. I know it." Silence. The room sank into a silence so heavy it felt like it could stop a person's lungs. Brianna lowered her hand and glanced at Garrett, trying to read him, trying to find even the smallest crack in that stillness. But his face remained a wall of stone. Finally, when she had nothing left to say, Garrett spoke. Only one question. Are you done? His voice was ice, steady, and without a tremor. Brianna swallowed, a cold line traveling up her spine. Garrett stood and went to the left drawer of the desk. He opened it, took out a small photo frame, and set it on the desktop. Turned toward Brianna. In the picture was a young woman with golden blonde hair and a smile bright as morning sun. She was holding 2 newborn babies, her eyes lowered to them with a love that seemed endless. Catherine, his wife, Wyatt and Cole's mother, the woman who had been taken 2 years ago in a car accident, leaving him with 2 children and a heart that didn't know how to mend. 2 years, Garrett said, his voice low and heavy. I haven't heard my sons laugh in 2 years. I hired the best psychologists in New York, the best nannies money could buy, specialists from Europe. Nothing worked. They stopped talking. They stopped smiling. They flinched every time someone raised their voice. He laid a finger on the frame, gentle, as if he were touching a memory. And today, a girl in a dirty apron did what none of them could. In 1 month, 1 single month, he lifted his gaze and looked straight into Brianna's eyes. Do you know what I saw in that garden, Brianna? I saw my sons run, not away from someone, but toward someone. I saw them laugh. I saw them happy, for the first time since their mother died. Brianna opened her mouth to speak, but Garrett raised a hand, a command for silence. Josie stays. She's no longer just a caretaker. From now on, she's their official guardian. Her salary will be tripled. Brianna went pale. Garrett, you can't be serious. I'm not finished, he cut in, his voice sharp as a blade. You are forbidden from being alone with my children. Ever. If you need something from them, Rosa will be present. If Rosa is not available, you wait. Brianna clenched her jaw, fighting the rage boiling in her chest. And one more thing. Garrett stood and came around the desk until he was directly in front of her. He was nearly a head taller, and when he looked down at her, his eyes were so cold they could have frozen hell itself. One more scream, one more tear you cause them, and there will be no wedding. Understood? Brianna swallowed her humiliation. She wanted to scream, to tear that calm, merciless face apart, to spit in his eyes that she was Brianna Hartwell, the daughter of one of the most powerful families on the East Coast. But she knew better than anyone that Garrett Ashford wasn't a man to test. So she forced a smile, small and obedient. Of course, darling. I understand. I'll do better. I promise. Garrett didn't answer. He only returned to the desk, sat down, and opened his laptop as if she no longer existed. That was the deepest insult of all. Brianna lowered her head, turned, and walked out. The oak door clicked shut behind her, and instantly, her face changed. The obedient smile vanished, replaced by pure hatred. Her green eyes flared like the fire of hell. She moved down the dark corridor, her heels striking a steady rhythm, until she stopped at a small room at the very end. Josie's room. Brianna placed her hand on the door, her fingers stroking the wood as if she were caressing prey. Then she leaned closer and whispered into the crack, her voice sweet and venomous. Enjoy your little victory, Nanny, because tomorrow you'll wish you were never born. That night, Garrett didn't sleep. He lay in bed with his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling while his mind spun with the images he'd witnessed in the garden. Brianna's warped face, her raised hand, his son's shoulders folding inward, the scream that tore the air apart, and their smiles when they were with Josie, a brutal contrast to the fear that seized them the moment Brianna appeared. He turned and looked at the other side of the bed, where Brianna slept deeply. Her breathing was even, her face peaceful as an angel's, but Garrett knew better than anyone that it was only a mask. The real demon was hiding underneath. He slid out of bed as quietly as a shadow, took his phone, and stepped into the hallway. His finger moved through his contacts and stopped on a name, Harrison Webb, his right hand for 10 years. The man who knew every secret the Ashford family carried and would take them to the grave. Garrett hit call. Harrison answered after the first ring, his voice alert even though it was nearly 2 a.m. Sir, I need you at the manor. Now, bring your tech team. I want cameras installed in every room of this house before sunrise. Hidden, untraceable. She can't know. There was no need to ask who she was. Harrison had worked for Garrett long enough to understand. Understood. We'll be there in 40 minutes. 40 minutes later, a black van with no license plates pulled up at the back gate. Harrison and 2 technicians worked in absolute silence, moving like ghosts from room to room. Cameras were concealed in smoke detectors, in picture frames, in chandeliers, tiny as a bean, yet sharp enough to capture every flicker of expression on a face. Garrett stood in his office and watched as Harrison linked the new system to the central server. That was when Harrison paused and frowned at the screen. "Sir, there's something here. The old hallway camera near the children's room. It's been recording for months, but the files were encrypted and hidden. Brianna must have bribed the previous security lead to keep these logs buried. I just managed to bypass the encryption and recover everything." Garrett stepped closer, his heart beating faster. "Show me." Harrison opened a folder. Hundreds of video files lined up in a long list, each stamped with date and time. 6 months of memory stored away without anyone knowing. "Do you want me to delete these to free up space, sir?" "No," Garrett said, his voice low and firm. "Leave them. Leave everything. You can go now." Harrison nodded and signaled for the team to pack up. Minutes later, the room held only Garrett, sitting before the computer screen in the dark. He drew a deep breath, then clicked a random file. The image appeared, black and white and slightly blurred, but clear enough to recognize. The second-floor hallway, the door to the children's bedroom, and Brianna. She was dragging Wyatt along, her hand clamped tight around the boy's wrist. Wyatt tried to brace his feet, his small face soaked with tears, his mouth open as if he were crying, but in the silent video no sound escaped. Garrett leaned forward, his heart pounding hard against his ribs. He couldn't see exactly what Brianna did when they disappeared into the corner of the hallway, but he saw his son's reaction when the child came back into view a few minutes later. Wyatt returned alone, unsteady, one hand gripping the other arm. He folded into himself, pressed against the wall, and cried without a voice. His small shoulders shook in waves. Garrett remembered that night. He'd been in New York, in the middle of an important meeting with partners from Chicago. His phone had buzzed. Brianna. He'd apologized and stepped outside to take the call. Her voice had been full of worry, full of love, full of concern. "Garrett, I'm so worried. Wyatt won't stop crying. He keeps hitting himself against the wall. I've tried everything, but nothing works. I think he needs medication, darling. Something is seriously wrong with him. Maybe we should consider a specialist, or even a facility that can help children like him." He had believed her. Every word. He'd called a doctor, booked appointments with a psychologist, even researched special care facilities for children with behavioral problems. He had believed his son was sick. When the truth was that his son was being tormented, Garrett opened another file, then another, then another. Each video was a piece of a nightmare coming into focus. Brianna's cold, cutting glances. The children's hurried steps whenever she appeared. The silent tears, the hunched shoulders. He didn't need to see every detail clearly to understand. His son's body language said everything. They were afraid. They were hurting. They were alone. And he, their father, had never known. A tear rolled down Garrett's cheek. Then another. The man who made the underworld tremble was crying alone in the dark, staring at a computer screen filled with the pain of his own children. He saved every video onto a separate hard drive, encrypted with a password only he knew, then locked it in the safe, hidden behind Catherine's portrait. "I'm sorry, my boys," Garrett whispered into the darkness, his voice shaking. "Your father was blind, but I swear on your mother's soul, that devil will pay for every single tear." He stayed there until dawn began to rise on the horizon, a soft orange light slipping through the gap in the curtains. Garrett Ashford didn't survive in the underworld by impulse. He survived by waiting, by gathering, and by striking when his enemy least expected it. The next morning, Garrett appeared at the breakfast table in a charcoal gray suit and a black tie, looking as if he were headed into a high-stakes meeting. He kissed his sons on the forehead, gave Josie a warm nod, then turned to Brianna with a distant, indifferent face. "I have meetings in Manhattan. I'll be back late tonight. Don't wait up." Brianna offered a sweet smile, perfect down to the last millimeter. "Of course, darling. Have a safe trip." She stood by the living room window and watched the black Bentley roll along the gravel drive, pass through the iron gate, and vanish beyond the final bend. She waited another 5 minutes, making sure he wouldn't return because he'd forgotten something. Then she moved. Brianna's steps were quick and decisive as she went straight to Garrett's office. The oak door wasn't locked. Garrett had never thought he needed to lock it, Because who in this house would dare step inside without permission? Brianna would. She walked directly to the landscape painting behind the desk, lifted it away, and revealed the steel safe door. The code was Catherine's birthday. Garrett thought no one knew, but Brianna had once seen him open it when he believed she was asleep. She tapped in each digit, and the steel door opened with a soft click. Inside were many things: cash, documents, hard drives, but Brianna cared about only one, the black velvet box in the top corner. She opened it, and the glitter of diamonds shot straight into her eyes. The Ashford family heirloom necklace. 3 generations of women in the family had worn it on their wedding day. Catherine had worn it, and by all the usual rules, Brianna would have been next. But not today. Today, the necklace would serve a different purpose. Brianna shoved the box into her jacket pocket, closed the safe, rehung the painting, and left the office as if she'd never been there at all. She walked down the hall and took the back stairs to the servants' wing. Josie's room sat at the end, a simple white-painted door without a lock. Brianna pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was small, clean, and so plain it was almost heartbreaking. A single bed, a small wardrobe, a desk with a few books, and on the hook behind the door, the worn fabric bag Josie carried every day. Brianna took the necklace from the velvet box, turned the bag upside down, and shoved it down to the bottom beneath an old sweater and a few crumpled papers. She rearranged everything carefully, making sure there was no trace. Before she left, Brianna paused in front of the small mirror on the wall. She studied her own reflection, smoothed her perfect hair, and smiled. "Goodbye, little nanny." 10 minutes later, a scream tore through the quiet of Ashford Manor. "Thief! Someone call the police!" Josie was in the playroom with the boys when she heard Brianna shrieking from the living room. She rushed out, Wyatt and Cole clinging close behind her, their small faces full of confusion. "Miss Brianna, what happened? Are you okay?" Brianna stood in the middle of the living room, her hand trembling around her phone, her face pale as if she'd just witnessed a murder. "The Ashford heirloom necklace is gone. I took it out of the safe this morning to clean it for the engagement party next week. I left it right here on this table. And now it's gone. Someone stole it." The police arrived within 20 minutes. 2 patrol cars pulled up at the gate, and 4 officers entered with grave expressions. Brianna told her story with tears in her eyes, her voice heavy with anguish. She pointed at Josie. "She's the only stranger in this house. She has access to everywhere. It must be her." The search began. They went through every room, every drawer, every shadowed corner, and then one officer returned from the servants' area, holding Josie's worn fabric bag and the glittering diamond necklace. "Found it. In her bag." Josie felt her blood turn to ice. No, that's impossible. I didn't." She fought to stay calm and turned to the lead officer. "Officer, please listen to me. I have never touched that safe. I don't even know the combination. Someone put this in my bag. Please, check the cameras, check anything. I'm begging you." The officer looked at her with judgment already in place. "Ma'am, the evidence is clear. The stolen property was found in your possession. Please turn around and put your hands behind your back." The handcuffs clicked shut, cold against Josie's wrists. She trembled, not because she feared for herself, but because of the sound of Wyatt and Cole crying behind her. She turned and looked at the 2 boys trying to run to her, held back by Rosa. "Wyatt, Cole, listen to me." She tried to keep her voice steady even as tears streamed down her face. "I need you to be brave, okay? Go to Rosa. Stay with Rosa. Everything will be fine. I promise." "No!" Cole screamed, fighting in Rosa's arms. "You're not bad. Tell them, Josie. Tell them you're not bad." Wyatt didn't say a word. He tore free of Rosa and ran to the nearest officer, punching the man's leg with his tiny fist. "Let her go. She's good. She's good." The officer gently pushed the boy away. Josie was led toward the door, and every step felt like she was walking on her own shattered heart. As she passed the front steps, Brianna stood there with a face arranged into false pity. She leaned down, her lips close to Josie's ear, and whispered softly enough that only Josie could hear. "Say goodbye to those brats, and while you rot in prison, your sick mother will die alone. No one will pay for her treatment. No one will hold her hand. She'll take her last breath calling your name, and you won't be there." Josie choked, her knees buckling, but an officer kept her upright and continued pushing her toward the car. She was pressed into the back seat of the patrol vehicle, the smell of plastic and old sweat hitting her at once. Through the window, she saw Wyatt and Cole screaming in Rosa's arms, saw Brianna standing on the steps with a victorious smile. The car door was about to close. This was the end. But at that exact moment, a sound ripped through the air, an engine roaring, coming closer. Fast, very close. The black Bentley tore into the courtyard like a bullet, tires grinding over gravel, carving a long scar before it stopped dead, positioned sideways across the patrol car's path. The engine roared, then fell silent. The door swung open, and Garrett Ashford stepped out. He wasn't in a suit. There was no tie. His white shirt was rolled to the elbows, as if he'd walked out of an important meeting and driven straight here without breathing. But what froze everyone in place wasn't his appearance. It was his face. There was no explosive rage, no shouting, only a lethal calm, cold as a winter lake sealed in ice, and more frightening than any fury. Garrett walked toward the police car, each step landing evenly on the gravel. The lead officer approached and lifted a hand to stop him. "Mr. Ashford, we have a situation here. We found stolen property in your employee's possession. She's being taken into custody for... Get that woman out of the car. Now." Garrett cut him off. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't a yell, but it carried so much authority the officer stopped mid-sentence. "Sir, with all due respect, we found evidence. The necklace was in her bag. We can't just..." "I said now." Garrett pulled his phone from his pocket, unlocked it, and started a video. He held it up in front of the officer, high enough that Brianna on the front steps could see it too. On the screen, the image was crisp and clear, high definition from the new cameras installed the night before. Brianna entered Garrett's office, looking around like a thief, then went straight to the landscape painting. She lifted it away, revealing the safe, punched in the code, and opened the door. Brianna took out the black velvet box, opened it, and the sparkle of diamonds flashed across her greedy face. Then she left the office, moved down the corridor, went down the stairs, and reached Josie's room. She pushed the door open, took out the necklace, and shoved it to the bottom of Josie's worn fabric bag. Before leaving, Brianna paused in front of the small mirror on the wall. She looked at her own reflection and smiled, triumphant and vicious. Then her lips moved, shaping words that didn't need sound to be understood. "Goodbye, little nanny." Brianna's face drained white as a corpse. She lunged down the steps, pointing at Garrett, her voice shrill. "That's fake. He manipulated it. He's trying to get rid of me because of that scheming girl. He's been sleeping with her, I know it. This is all a setup." Garrett didn't even look at her. He turned to the lead officer, his tone as calm as if they were discussing the weather. "Officer, this video is evidence of planting false evidence, filing a false police report, and attempted framing. The timestamp is authentic. The footage is unedited. Your tech team can verify if you need. But right now, I want to press charges against this woman." The officer looked at the video, looked at Brianna trembling on the steps, then looked at Garrett. The decision wasn't difficult. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Brianna, "please step forward. You're under arrest for filing a false police report and evidence tampering." No, you can't do this. I'm Brianna Hartwell. My father will have your badge. My family will..." Brianna screamed as two officers moved in, cuffed her, and marched her toward the patrol car, the same car she'd planned to use minutes earlier to destroy Josie. The cruelest irony. "Garrett." Brianna twisted back, her face warped with rage and fear. "You can't do this to me. My family will destroy you. My father. Your father will receive a copy of these videos tonight." Garrett cut in, his voice cold as ice. "Along with footage of how you treated my children over the past 6 months. Every slap, every scream, every tear you made them cry. We'll see who destroys whom." It landed like a killing blow. Brianna knew better than anyone that if those videos surfaced, high society would bury her alive. Her family, who prized reputation above everything, would disown her without hesitation. She shrieked as she was shoved into the car, her voice thick with hatred. "You'll regret this, Garrett Ashford. You and your little maid deserve each other. You'll both rot in hell." The car door slammed shut, cutting off her screams. Garrett didn't look back. He moved quickly to the other patrol car, where Josie was still seated in the back, and opened the door. She was curled into the corner, her honey-colored eyes swollen red from crying, her wrists marked with angry red lines from the cuffs. She looked up, stunned, unable to believe what had just happened. Garrett bent down and gently removed the handcuffs from her wrists. His hand was warm and steady. "I'm sorry, Josie," he said, softer than she'd ever heard him. "I should have protected you better." Josie stepped out of the car, her legs shaking, and instantly, two small bodies rushed toward her like bullets. Wyatt and Cole wrapped their arms around her legs, sobbing hard, broken little sounds spilling out. "Josie! Josie! We knew you didn't do it! We knew!" She dropped to her knees and pulled both boys into her arms, tears running down her cheeks. A moment of peace in the middle of a storm. Garrett stood and watched them, his heart melting at the sight. But it didn't last. Josie suddenly went pale. She lifted a hand to her forehead, her eyes going unfocused, her body swaying like a willow in wind. I don't feel." She collapsed. Garrett lunged and caught her before her head hit the ground. Her body burned hot in his arms, frighteningly light. Her sleeve slid up as she fell, and Garrett saw it. A needle mark on her arm, fresh, with a small beige bandage. He stared at it, his mind reeling. She wasn't a drug user. Garrett knew that in his bones. So what was that needle mark? What secret was Josie hiding? Garrett drove like a madman through the streets, his hands locked around the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Josie lay unconscious in the passenger seat, her head tilted to one side, her face so pale it looked as if every drop of blood had vanished. He'd taken off his jacket and covered her, but her body still trembled, her breathing so faint he had to keep glancing over, just to make sure she was still breathing. In the rearview mirror, Ashford Manor grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared. He'd left Wyatt and Cole with Rosa, the boys sobbing, clinging to his legs and refusing to let go. "Josie will be okay," he'd promised them, his voice firm even as his heart broke apart. "Dad promises. I'll bring her back." Street. Mary's hospital came into view, and Garrett slammed on the brakes right at the emergency entrance, not even bothering to find a parking spot. He carried Josie out of the car, ran inside, and shouted for a doctor. She was placed on a gurney and rushed away at once, the emergency room doors swinging shut in his face. And all he could do was stand there, staring through the small window, powerless. Garrett sank onto a cold plastic chair in the hallway, his head bowed, his hands clasped together. He tried to remember the last time he'd felt fear like this. It had been the night Catherine died, when the doctor stepped out with sorrow on his face and Garrett knew, even before a word was spoken, that he'd lost her forever. His hands were still shaking when he looked down at Josie's worn fabric bag. He'd brought it with him to search for identification, an insurance number, anything that might help the hospital. But when he opened the bag, what he found shattered his heart a second time in the same night. Hospital bills. Dozens of them, stacked together, corners wrinkled, some of them marked with water stains as if someone had cried over them. The patient name read Patricia Brennan. Diagnosis, stage 3 lung cancer. The total debt was a massive figure, the kind of number Garrett knew a young nanny could never repay in an entire lifetime. He kept turning pages, and found the thing that stole his breath. Plasma donation receipts. $50 per visit. Stamped 7 o'clock this morning. Garrett stared at the receipt as his mind slowly began to fit the pieces together. 7 o'clock. What time had Josie woken up? 5? 4:30? She'd gone to a plasma center, sat there for hours while they drew her blood, separated the plasma, and returned the rest. All for $50. Then she'd gone back to Ashford Manor, played with the boys all day under the sun, endured Brianna's screaming, endured the tension, endured the fear. And she still smiled, still ran after them, still pretended to be a heavy-footed monster, still lifted them up every time they fell, still loved them as if they were her own sons. While her body was breaking down, while she'd skipped breakfast to make it to the plasma appointment on time, while she was slowly dying to keep her mother alive. "God, Josie," Garrett whispered, his hand trembling as he held the receipt. "What have we done to you?" The emergency room doors opened, and a doctor walked toward him with a grave expression. Garrett sprang to his feet. "Mr. Ashford, your employee is suffering from severe anemia and chronic malnutrition. Her iron levels are dangerously low. Her body mass index indicates she's been skipping meals regularly for months. Combined with the plasma donation this morning and the extreme stress she experienced today, her body simply shut down. It couldn't take any more. Will she recover? With rest, proper nutrition, and iron supplements, yes. But she needs to stop working for at least 2 weeks. Complete bed rest. And she absolutely cannot donate plasma again. If she does, the next time she collapses, We might not be able to bring her back. Garrett nodded, swallowing hard. When the doctor turned away, he took out his phone and called Harrison. I need you to do something. Find out the total medical debt for a patient named Patricia Brennan at St. Mary's Hospital. Cancer treatment. Pay it. All of it. I don't care how much it is. Anonymous donation. Then hire a private nurse to care for her at home. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The best care money can buy. He paused. And Harrison, Josie doesn't know who paid. She can never know. Understood? Understood, sir. 2 hours later, Josie woke up. Garrett sat in the chair beside her bed and watched her eyes slowly open, confused as she took in the white hospital room, and the first thing she said wasn't about herself. The children, where are they? Are they okay? I have to go back. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak, and she fell back into the pillow. Panic flooded her eyes. I can't afford this hospital. I don't have insurance. My mother, she needs her medication. I have to. Garrett placed his hand over hers, gentle but firm. Josie, look at me. She stopped, her breathing fast, her honey-colored eyes wet and red as she looked at him. Your mother's debt is paid. All of it. Silence. Josie blinked, as if she didn't understand what he'd just said. What? A private nurse is with her right now. The best care available. She's being taken care of. Garrett squeezed her hand lightly. You don't have to sell your blood anymore, Josie. You don't have to starve yourself anymore. It's over. Josie opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She stared at him, eyes wide, lips trembling. Then she broke. Not the kind of crying born from fear or pain, the kind that comes from relief, from a crushing weight finally lifted off the shoulders, from someone who's fought alone for far too long and suddenly doesn't have to fight anymore. Why? She sobbed, tears pouring down her face. Why would you do this? I'm nobody. I'm just the help. You gave my sons their laughter back, Garrett said, his fingers brushing the old silver bracelet on her wrist, the one she never took off. After 2 years of silence, 2 years of darkness, you walked into our lives and brought them back to me. You're not nobody, Josie. He looked straight into her eyes. You're everything. That night, after Josie had fallen asleep in the hospital bed, with an intravenous line in her hand, Garrett drove back to Ashford Manor. For the first time in 2 years, he went into the boys' bedroom himself to read them a story. He held the book about the brave dragon, the book Josie read to them every night, and began to read. When he reached the part where the dragon roared, he tried to imitate the sound he'd heard Josie make. It was terribly wrong. It sounded more like a choking cat than a fire-breathing dragon. Wyatt and Cole looked at each other, then burst into helpless laughter. Dad, that's not how Josie does it, Cole shouted through giggles. Then teach me, Garrett said, and he smiled too, for the first time in a long time. The boys competed to show him how to growl the right way, how to puff his cheeks, how to make his eyes go wide. Garrett copied them, awkward, ridiculous, but trying with everything he had, and when the children finally fell asleep, he stood in the doorway and looked at them. 2 angelic faces, peaceful in sleep, the curve of a smile still resting on their lips. For the first time in 2 years, Ashford Manor felt like a home. Garrett thought the storm had passed. He was wrong. A week passed like a dream. Josie recovered little by little in the hospital, color slowly returning to her pale cheeks, light beginning to sparkle again in her honey-colored eyes. And when she was strong enough to be discharged, Garrett drove to pick her up himself and brought her back to Ashford Manor. But the moment she stepped inside, she realized everything had changed. The small room in the servants' wing was no longer hers. Garrett had moved all her belongings to the main floor, into the honored guest room right beside Wyatt and Cole's room. It was 3 times the size of her old space, with a wide window overlooking the rose garden, an oak 4-poster bed, and a private bath with a marble tub. This is too much, Josie said, standing in the center of the room, unable to believe what she was seeing. I can't accept this. You can, and you will, Garrett replied, his voice allowing no argument. The children need you close, and I need to know you're safe. And life at Ashford Manor began to change in ways no one would have expected. Garrett, the man who used to disappear into work from early morning until deep night, started coming home on time every day. He learned how to play with the boys, even though he was still awkward and clumsy. He learned how to do the dragon voice, even though it still sounded like a choking cat. He learned how to braid Cole's hair, even though it came out crooked every time and Josie had to redo it. But he tried, and that mattered more than any perfection. The looks between Garrett and Josie began to linger. When their hands brushed by accident while tending to the boys, neither one hurried to pull away. When Josie laughed, Garrett found he couldn't look elsewhere. When Garrett smiled, rare and precious, Josie felt her heart beat faster. One night, after Wyatt and Cole were asleep, they went down to the kitchen for tea. Rosa had gone to her room, the house sunk into quiet, broken only by the steady tick of the antique clock in the living room. The kitchen was filled with soft, golden light, warm and intimate. They sat side by side at the island, 2 steaming cups of tea, only a few inches between them. Garrett turned to look at Josie. The lamplight warmed her face, catching the curve of her lips, the shimmer in her eyes. She was beautiful, not the sharp, calculated beauty of Brianna, but something gentle and real, warm as morning sun. He lifted his hand, meaning to touch her cheek. Josie held her breath, her eyes fluttering shut. And at that exact moment, the doorbell rang violently, shattering the spell. Garrett pulled his hand back and frowned. 10 at night. Who came at a time like this? Harrison appeared at the kitchen doorway, his face unusually tense. Sir, we have visitors. At this hour? Mrs. Margaret Holloway, your late wife's mother. Garrett stood so fast his whole body tightened like a drawn wire. Margaret, Catherine's mother, Wyatt and Cole's grandmother, the woman who hadn't bothered to appear in 3 years, not even at her own daughter's funeral. And sir, Harrison hesitated, she's not alone. Miss Brianna Hartwell is with her. Brianna? Garrett growled. She's supposed to be in custody. Released on bail this morning, sir. Her family's lawyers worked fast. They got her out on grounds of insufficient evidence for the child abuse charges pending further investigation, and it appears she's found an ally. 5 minutes later, Garrett and Josie stood in the main living room. The door opened, and Margaret Holloway walked in as if she owned the place. 63 years old, platinum hair cut in a perfect short style, a white fur coat draped over her shoulders, icy blue eyes sweeping the room with open disdain. Behind her was Brianna. Gone was the wild screaming madness of the day she was arrested. She was dressed in black from head to toe, her makeup soft, her eyes swollen red as if she'd been crying for nights. A perfect victim. A snake in lambskin. And with them came a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, gold-rimmed glasses, and a black leather briefcase. A lawyer. Margaret stopped in the center of the room, her gaze traveling over Josie from head to toe with undisguised disgust. So this is the little servant who's replaced my daughter in this house. I must say, Garrett, your taste has certainly declined. What do you want, Margaret? Garrett asked coldly. You haven't visited your grandchildren in 3 years, not even at their mother's funeral. Margaret's brow pinched slightly, as if the question itself offended her. I stayed away because the grief was too much. Losing Catherine destroyed me. I couldn't bear to see her children, to be reminded of her every time I looked at their faces. Her voice trembled, convincing and practiced. But Garrett knew better. Margaret hadn't been there for Catherine when her daughter was alive. She'd been busy with parties, vacations, men 20 years younger than her. So why was she here now? But Brianna called me, Margaret continued, placing a hand on Brianna's shoulder as if to protect her. She told me what's happening here. How you've brought a criminal into your home. How you're letting her raise my grandchildren. And I will not allow it. I will not allow my grandchildren to be raised by her kind. Her kind? Garrett repeated, his voice turning dangerous. The lawyer stepped forward and presented a thick file. Mr. Ashford, this is a formal petition for full custody of Wyatt and Cole Ashford. Mrs. Holloway is filing on grounds of morally inappropriate environment, parental negligence, and exposure to psychological harm. Garrett didn't touch the file. Get out of my house. We'll see you in court, Margaret said, her smile thin and cold. I have judges, politicians, friends in the highest places. You may run the underworld, Garrett, but I run the world that matters, the world that decides who gets to raise children and who loses them forever. She turned on her heel. Brianna followed, throwing a triumphant smile at Josie before she walked out the door. The door slammed shut. Silence fell over the room. Josie was the first to speak, her voice shaking. Garrett, maybe I should leave. If I go, they'll leave you alone. They won't have grounds to take the children. It's me they want to destroy, not you. If I disappear. Garrett turned, gripped her shoulders, and looked straight into her eyes. "No, you don't run. We don't run. Not from them. Not from anyone." He took out his phone and dialed. "Harrison, I need Judge Patterson. Tonight. Tell him I'm calling in every favor he owes me. Every single one." Josie stared at him, confused. "What are you going to do?" Garrett didn't answer right away. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't only anger or resolve. It was something else. Something deeper, warmer, fiercer. Something she didn't dare name. "Tomorrow, we go to war," he said, his voice dropping. "But tonight I'm going to do something I should have done the moment I saw you in that garden." The Fairfield County Family Court. 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. Not a single seat left open. Reporters from papers big and small crowded the back rows, cameras and notebooks ready. Lawyers on both sides sat stiffly behind towering stacks of files. And there were the spectators, the ones hungry for a high society spectacle. The ones who wanted to watch an infamous Mafia boss, Garrett Ashford, dragged down into the mud. On one side of the courtroom, Margaret Holloway sat like a queen on a throne. She wore an elegant gray dress, a strand of pearls wrapped around her neck, platinum hair styled to perfection. Beside her, Brianna Hartwell played the victim just as flawlessly. She was dressed in black from head to toe, her makeup soft, her eyes swollen red, lifting a handkerchief now and then to dab at imaginary tears. 2 snakes in lambskin, ready to sink their teeth into prey. Across the aisle, Garrett sat with his back straight, his face expressionless as stone. Beside him, Josie tried to stay calm, but her hands trembled beneath the table. She held Garrett's hand tightly, and he squeezed back, lending her the strength she needed. The hearing began with the usual formalities. Margaret's attorney laid out the reasons she deserved custody more than the children's biological father. An unsuitable home environment, the presence of a strange woman in the house, suspicion of an improper relationship. Garrett listened without reacting, as if the accusations were no more than flies buzzing in the air. Then Margaret's attorney rose, holding an old file, and the atmosphere in the room changed in an instant. "Your Honor, Mr. Ashford has painted this woman as a saint, the perfect caretaker, the angel who saved his children from silence. But he has omitted one crucial detail." He turned toward Josie, his gaze cold. "Miss Josie Brennan has a criminal record." A murmur rolled through the courtroom like surf. Reporters bent over their notes, writing furiously. Margaret's lips curled in triumph. Brianna covered her mouth, pretending to be horrified. "At age 16, the lawyer continued, his voice carrying through the room, "Miss Brennan spent 8 months in a juvenile detention center. The charge? Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. She stabbed a man with a kitchen knife." The courtroom erupted. Shouts, gasps, jeers, the judge's gavel pounding for order. Garrett turned to Josie, his eyes wide with shock. He hadn't known. She'd never told him. Josie lowered her head, tears falling onto the wooden table. She couldn't look at him. She couldn't bear the disappointment she feared she would see in his eyes. "Is this the woman you want near your grandchildren, Your Honor?" Margaret's attorney asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "A violent criminal? A woman capable of stabbing someone with a knife? What happens when those children make her angry? What happens when she loses control again?" The judge, a graying man with sharp eyes, looked down at Josie. "Miss Brennan, is this true?" Silence. The entire room held its breath. Josie kept her head bowed, her shoulders shaking. Garrett placed his hand over hers and squeezed gently. She felt the warmth of his palm, the strength of his presence, and she remembered what he'd said to her the night before the hearing. "Whatever they throw at us, we face it together. You are not alone anymore, Josie. Never again." Josie squeezed his hand one last time, then let go. She stood, wiped her tears with the back of her hand, lifted her head, faced the judge directly. "Yes, Your Honor, it's true." Brianna exhaled in relief and smiled in victory. Margaret nodded, satisfied. But Josie wasn't finished. "I was 16 years old. The man I stabbed was my stepfather, Donald Brennan." The smile on Brianna's lips vanished. Margaret's brow tightened. "I came home from school that day," Josie continued, her voice trembling but unbroken, "and I found him on top of my mother in the kitchen. He was beating her face into the floor. Her blood was on the walls. Her eye was swollen shut. Her lip was split open. She wasn't moving anymore. And I thought, I thought he was going to kill her. The courtroom fell into absolute stillness. He was a big man, over 6 feet tall, more than 200 pounds. I was a girl, 16 years old, 90 pounds soaking wet. I screamed at him to stop, but he didn't hear me, or he didn't care. So I grabbed the only thing I could reach, a knife from the counter, and I made him stop. Josie's voice grew stronger, echoing through the room. I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to stab anyone. I just wanted my mother to keep breathing. I just wanted him to stop hitting her. She looked straight into the judge's eyes. I accepted my punishment. I served my time, 8 months in a juvenile detention facility. I finished my education there, with honors. And every day since I got out, I've worked double shifts, sometimes triple, to pay for the cancer treatment of the same mother I saved that day. Josie turned to Margaret, and her gaze held no fear now, only dignity. I am not a criminal, Your Honor. I am a daughter who did what any child would do when they see their mother being beaten to death. Then she looked at Brianna, and for the first time she saw real fear in that woman's eyes. And if anyone ever tried to hurt Wyatt and Cole, I would do it again. I would use my hands, my teeth, my entire life to protect them, because that's what a mother does. Josie paused, letting her words sink into every person in the courtroom. She defends. Silence. Total, suffocating silence filled the room. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Even Margaret couldn't meet her eyes. And then Garrett stood up. Garrett rose, tall and commanding, and stepped to stand beside Josie. He took her hand and laced his fingers through hers, in front of everyone in the courtroom. Your Honor, I have something to add. The judge looked at him and nodded permission. Garrett drew a deep breath, then spoke, his voice carrying through the stunned quiet. A few days ago, once Josie was strong enough to leave the hospital, we were married in a private civil ceremony. The courtroom erupted like a volcano. Shouts, whispers, camera shutters snapping in a rapid storm. Reporters nearly leapt from their seats. Margaret's attorney dropped his pen, and Margaret Holloway shot to her feet, her face blazing red with anger. What? Brianna went pale, her lips trembling as if someone had punched her in the gut. The judge pounded the gavel again and again for order, and it took nearly a full minute before the room settled into silence. Garrett continued without wavering. Judge Patterson officiated the ceremony at my home. Harrison Webb, my head of security, served as our witness. All documents have been filed and processed. The marriage is legal and binding under the laws of Connecticut. He met the judge's eyes. Josie Brennan is not my nanny, Your Honor. She is my wife, and she is the legal stepmother of my children. Margaret's attorney stammered, trying to find his voice. This is clearly a scheme to manipulate the court. They got married just to win this case. This is fraud. No. Garrett cut him off, his tone steel cold. This is a man protecting his family, by any means necessary. He turned toward Harrison, seated in the back row, and nodded. Harrison stood, walked to the judge's bench, and handed over a small USB drive. Your Honor, Garrett said, Mrs. Holloway and her counsel have spoken at length about violence and danger, about protecting children from harmful influences. I would like to submit evidence of who the real danger is. Brianna realized what was happening. She sprang to her feet, trying to push through the rows and run for the door. But 2 court security officers were faster, blocking her and forcing her back into her seat. The large screen at the front of the courtroom lit up, and the video began to play. The first image appeared, crisp and clear from high-resolution surveillance footage. The second-floor hallway at Ashford Manor. The screen displayed the horrifying footage Garrett had discovered. The courtroom watched in a deathly silence as Brianna's true nature was exposed, her cruelty toward a defenseless child, leaving no room for doubt. Gasps of horror erupted from the gallery as the video played on, showing Wyatt was crying without sound, his face wet with tears. But he didn't dare scream. The next video, the dining room. Cole sat in front of a plate of food, chewing each small bite slowly the way a 4-year-old does. Brianna walked up, snatched the plate from his hands with disgust on her face. Eat faster, you insufferable little brat. I don't have all day to watch you drool over your food. Cole shrank back, wide-eyed with fear. The next video, the playroom, toys scattered across the floor. Brianna walked in, looked around, then kicked the pile of toys hard, sending them flying. I am so sick of these brats. I am so sick of this mess. Why can't they just disappear? The next video. The children's bedroom at night. Wyatt was crying, maybe from a nightmare. Brianna entered, not to comfort him, but to scream in his face. Your mother is dead. Stop crying for her. She's never coming back. Shut up. A choked sob rippled through the courtroom. Women covered their mouths, eyes shining red. Men clenched their jaws, fists tightening. Even the judge had to turn away for a moment to steady himself. Then the screen shifted to a series of other clips. Josie holding Wyatt in the night when he cried from a nightmare. She sang softly, patiently, until he fell asleep again in her arms. Josie sitting with Cole, teaching him the alphabet. C is for Cole, the coolest boy in the whole world. Cole laughed and threw his arms around her, Josie wrapping Wyatt's knee after he fell in the garden. See? All better. You're the bravest knight I know. Josie dancing with the boys in the rose garden, hand in hand, spinning beneath the late afternoon sun. All three of them laughed until they could barely breathe, their clear laughter ringing out like bells. A brutal contrast. Devil and angel, darkness and light. When the video ended, the screen went dark, and suffocating silence swallowed the room. Margaret sat there with a face as white as death. Slowly, she turned to Brianna, and her eyes were no longer those of an ally. They were the eyes of someone betrayed. You told me they were difficult children, she whispered, her voice shaking with anger. You told me she was the problem. You told me Garrett was neglecting them. You lied to me. You used me. Brianna opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The judge struck the gavel, the crack sounding like thunder. I have seen enough. His voice was controlled fury. The petition for custody filed by Mrs. Margaret Holloway is hereby denied. Full custody of Wyatt and Cole Ashford remains with their father, Mr. Garrett Ashford, and their stepmother, Mrs. Josie Ashford. A beat. Furthermore, this court orders an immediate investigation into Miss Brianna Hartwell for suspected child abuse and psychological torment of minors. Officers, please escort Miss Hartwell out of this courtroom and into custody, pending further proceedings. 2 officers stepped in and hauled Brianna to her feet. She howled in resistance, her body thrashing as she tried to break free, her face distorted with a mixture of raw rage and burgeoning fear. Garrett, you can't do this to me. My family will destroy you. My father will make you pay. You and your little maid will regret this for the rest of your miserable lives. Her voice was cracking with desperate threats, the high-pitched vitriol filling every corner of the silent courtroom. Garrett didn't look at her. He only stood there, his hand tight around Josie's, eyes fixed straight ahead with a chilling indifference. She was forcibly removed, her bitter protests echoing through the gallery until the heavy doors finally slammed shut, plunging the room into a ringing silence. Margaret Holloway stood, gathered her things in silence. She didn't look at Garrett, didn't look at Josie, didn't look at anyone. She walked out with the posture of a defeated woman, alone and humiliated. And Josie broke. She turned to Garrett, pressed her face into his chest, and sobbed. Not from sadness, not from fear, but from relief. Because at last, the nightmare was over. Garrett held her tight, rested his chin on the top of her head, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to breathe out. They had won. Against every obstacle, every scheme, and the weight of the whole world, they had won. The black Bentley rolled along the familiar road leading back to Ashford Manor. Inside the car, silence settled between them, but it wasn't the heavy kind. It was the silence of 2 people who'd walked through hell together and were now on the way home to something that felt like heaven. Josie sat in the passenger seat, eyes turned toward the window, watching rows of ancient oak trees slide past. She still couldn't believe what had just happened. The courtroom, the truth laid bare, the victory. It all felt like a dream she might wake from at any moment. What happens now? She asked softly, her voice raw from too much crying. Garrett didn't answer with words. He only reached across, took her hand, and laced his fingers through hers, and he didn't let go. For the rest of the drive, they sat like that, hand in hand, in silence. But that silence said more than 1,000 sentences ever could. When the car stopped at the gates of Ashford Manor, Josie saw 2 small figures waiting, bouncing on their toes with impatience. Wyatt and Cole. Rosa stood behind them, eyes shining with tears, smiling. The moment Josie opened the door, the boys rushed her like 2 bullets and wrapped their arms around her, refusing to let go. Josie, you're back. Rosa said you won. She said the bad lady can't take us away, Cole shouted, pressing his face into her stomach. Wyatt didn't say anything. He only held on tight, as if she might disappear the second he loosened his grip. Josie dropped to her knees and gathered both children into her arms, tears spilling again. I'm not going anywhere, my brave little knights. Never again. After Rosa led the boys inside for baths and dinner, Garrett took Josie's hand and guided her out to the rose garden. Late afternoon sunlight, honey gold, flooded the beds, laying a warm glow over roses in full bloom. A soft breeze stirred the petals, carrying sweetness through the air. They stopped in a quiet corner beneath the branches of an old apple tree. Josie looked around, and suddenly she understood. This was where she'd held Wyatt and Cole on that fateful afternoon, where Garrett had stood in the shadows, watching her, and decided not to fire her. Where everything began. This is where you came to fire me, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Garrett turned to her, his gray eyes strangely gentle. This is also where I fell in love with you. Josie spun toward him, eyes wide, unable to believe what she'd heard. Garrett stepped closer and took both her hands in his. I drove 2 hours from Manhattan that day, furious, ready to destroy you based on lies I was told. But then I saw my sons run across that lawn. I saw them throw themselves into your arms. I saw you drop to your knees in the dirt without hesitation, catching them like they were the most precious things in the world. He lifted a hand and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. I saw your old silver bracelet catch the light. I heard my sons laugh for the first time in 2 years, and I knew, even before my mind could make sense of it, that you were the most precious thing to ever enter this house. Garrett pulled a black velvet box from his suit pocket. Josie stopped breathing. We got married for papers, for court, for strategy, he said, his voice lowering. It was a move to protect you, to protect the children, to win the case. Then, he did something she never imagined she'd see. Garrett Ashford, the most powerful mafia boss in the Northeast, the man who made the underworld tremble, sank to one knee on the grass, right where Josie often knelt when she played with the boys. But I don't want our marriage to be a strategy, Josie. I want it to be a promise. A real promise. Forever. He opened the velvet box. Inside wasn't a cold white diamond like the lifeless stones Brianna had once flaunted. It was a honey yellow diamond, the color of Josie's eyes, surrounded by small white diamonds glittering like stars. Will you build this family with me, Josie? Truly? Forever? Josie cried. She couldn't find her voice. She only nodded, again and again, as if she feared he wouldn't understand. Yes, Garrett. 1,000,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, right beside the old silver bracelet she never removed. The bracelet her mother had given her before everything fell apart. 2 pieces of jewelry. One old and one new. One from the past and one from the future, resting side by side on her small hand. Garrett rose, cupped her cheek, leaned down, and kissed her. In the rose garden, under honey gold sunlight, they kissed for the first time as a real husband and wife. Not because of paperwork, not because of court, but because of love. From the second-floor window, 2 small faces peered down, eyes wide, mouths open. "Dad's kissing Josie!" Cole hissed, giggling. "You. Gross." Wyatt frowned, but then he smiled too. "Does this mean Josie stays forever?" Cole asked, hope flooding his voice. Wyatt looked down at the garden, where his father held the woman who'd brought laughter back into their lives. "Forever," the boy said, and for the first time in 2 years, he believed it. Below, Garrett and Josie ended the kiss and held each other as they looked toward the house. Ashford Manor, once a cold fortress of a mafia boss, once a place filled with shadows and pain, was now full of light. Warm windows glowing, children's laughter drifting from inside, the rich smell of food rising from Rosa's kitchen. This was home. This was family. The sun slid lower on the horizon, painting the sky in breathtaking bands of orange, pink, and purple. Garrett Ashford, the man the underworld feared, had finally found the one thing all his money and power could never buy: a family. And that is the ending of today's story. A story about love surviving prejudice, about the courage of a small woman standing against the world, about the heart of a cold man awakened by a child's laughter. The lesson we can take from it is simple, yet deep. Never judge a person by appearance or by their past. Josie had a record, but her heart was cleaner than anyone's. Never give up hope. No matter how far life pushes you toward the edge, And most of all, real love doesn't come from perfection. It comes from acceptance, understanding, and the willingness to fight for the people you love. If this story touched your heart, if you cried with Josie, raged with Garrett, and cheered when justice was served, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next moving story. Leave a like and share this video with the people you love, so the message of love and hope can spread further. We'd truly love to hear what you felt. What do you think about this story? Have you ever met people like Josie in real life? People judged unfairly because of their past but carrying a heart of gold? Or have you ever seen love grow from a beginning no one expected? Share with us in the comments below. We read every comment, and we value every message you share from the deepest places in your heart. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's story. Wishing all of you watching this video strong health, a joyful life, and peaceful days beside the people you love most. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.